Now it's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation.
What are you people? On dope?
Where you can toke.
I inhale frequently.
Or you can talk.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
Or you can toke and talk.
10 federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
While we talk about toke on Toker Talk Radio.
So, by the way, when it comes to pot, if you're 40 years old, you live in a log cabin in Oregon, you got 12 giant pot plants in your backyard, have a ball.
Live from beautiful Portland, Oregon at Rolla J Studios.
Hey, this is great.
Yes, not cannabis.
Plus your calls live at 971-533-7111.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel? Gateway theory doesn't work. It's a reality.
Holland, is it real? Don't tease me.
We're locking up people that take a couple of puffs of marijuana, and the next thing you know, they got 10 years.
And now, here's your host, the guru of ganja graphics, the sultan of sativa statistics, and the worst nightmare of a reefer mad prohibitionist. A polite, perspicacious, productive pothead with a propensity for PowerPoint. Radical Russ Belville.
Welcome back, everyone. Time for Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio. If your brain is not full enough, better dump some out, and we're going to fill it some more. We've got the last bit of Paul Armentano's presentation on cannabis and psychomotor performance coming up after this first break that we take. Some of those stats are great things that you can use as one-liners, and I'm definitely going to steal them for some of my presentations. The odds ratio for marijuana-using drivers, once you correct for age and gender, is no different, no statistically significant difference from those drivers who are completely sober. So all those times when Kevin Sabet and the Project Sam people are saying, oh, marijuana, twice the crash risk, it's bunk. They were getting twice the crash risk because guess who smokes a lot of pot compared to other demos? Young men. Guess who gets in a lot of wrecks? Young men. Once you account for that, there was no statistically significant difference. And the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration tells us that being pregnant is a 42% increase in risk. Driving with a cigarette is a 50% increase in risk. And driving with someone else in the car doubles your risk of getting into a crash. And these are things we would all accept as acceptable risks. Nobody wants to stop pregnant women from driving, or nobody wants to stop you from being able to smoke a cigarette in your own car. Well, now, there are people that want to pass laws to make it illegal to smoke in your car if you've got kids in your car. So I guess I can't say that one for sure. And I'm pretty sure we want to still allow people to be able to drive cars with other people in them. Anyway, we got more from Paul Armentano coming up, plus at 20 after our Electric Tuesday Daily Toker Tune of the Day. And then in the last half hour, I'll take a look at a couple of stories out there on the wires, including a rebuttal for one of these Project Sam people in Louisiana. Stay tuned.
420 Radio, turning red states and blue states green.
420 Radio is brought to you by Sacred Serum, who is focused on creating elegant and sophisticated cannabis solutions through its line of dispensers and vaporizers that come preloaded with the world's finest cannabis concentrate. Sacred Serum's concentrate is made on pharmaceutical-grade supercritical CO2 extraction machines that use absolutely no butane or other toxic chemicals. The Vesica, the company's innovative new way to dab and frost, is now available in dispensaries across California. Sacred Serum, elegance and sophistication concentrated.
Hey, I'm Herb Thrasher, host of the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour, live every Friday night at 8 Pacific. Tune in for 2 hours of metal marijuana mayhem featuring exclusive interviews with the latest bands, highlights of live shows, and the latest in marijuana news. It's the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour, Friday nights at 8 p.m. at 420 Radio, or catch the replay on Saturday nights.
Come join the fun at the CannaCon Expo, the nation's largest cannabis marketplace for products, services, and ideas. CannaCon is where the cannabis industry does business. CannaCon is coming to the Colorado Convention Center in downtown Denver, kicking off Thursday, June 11th through Saturday, June 13th. Tickets are on sale now at cannacon.org. That's CannaCon, CANNACON.org. If you're looking for the best deals on growing gear and the most innovative products in the market, don't miss CannaCon. CannaCon will provide you with the opportunity to meet and do business directly and most affordably with the grow gurus and suppliers. CannaCon seminars are designed to be informal, open, and an educational conference where growers, processors, retailers, suppliers, and consultants can frankly discuss issues that impact this thriving industry. Don't miss CannaCon coming to the Colorado Convention Center June 11th through Saturday the 13th. Tickets are on sale now at cannacon.org.
What this means is people that use cannabis achieve maximal THC blood levels immediately after inhalation. What we also see is their THC blood levels are falling during the acute impairment phase that we talked about, that 20 to 40 minute window. Their levels are actually going down. So we have an inverse correlation between maximal levels of the drug in the system and maximal influence of that drug on person's performance. That's called counterclockwise hysteresis. It means drug effect lags behind maximal drug levels. That's not that unique for a lot of drugs, but it is inconsistent with how alcohol is absorbed. The reason we have per se levels for alcohol is because alcohol does not have this inverse correlation. Maximal blood alcohol levels are positively coincide with maximal impairment of performance. And we have to shift gears and make people understand that's not applicable here for marijuana. You'll also see that carboxy-THC, which is an inert byproduct, it doesn't show up until sometime later. That's because that is what THC is being broken down and absorbed into. So of course it's going to take some time to show up. And then you see in red is the pharmacokinetics of oral THC. And you see a very different plateau. In fact, you never see any spike whatsoever. So you can have individuals that can be highly impaired by oral THC, but they never have particular high THC blood levels. So again, it shows the limitation of trying to infer behavioral performance from THC blood levels. I'm just going to go over this really quick and say that as much of you in this room should know, the presence of carboxy-THC in urine is not indicative of recency of use or behavioral impairment. So says everyone. You're just not going to find an agency who says otherwise, including NHTSA, who says it is impossible to predict specific effects based on carboxy-THC concentrations. And the National Department of Justice says this as well. They say drug tests indicate drug use but not drug impairment. A positive result, even when confirmed, only indicates that a particular substance is present in the test subject's body tissue, does not indicate recency of use, frequency of use, amount of use, or impairment. In other words, it doesn't answer any fundamental question we would actually be seeking an answer for. Now, a lot of lawmakers have learned this lesson lately, so they say, okay, forget about carboxy-THC, let's look at THC in blood. And at one time, it was believed that if there was going to be any way to correlate the presence of this substance in any particular matrix, it was going to be with blood. But as more and more researchers have looked into this and have tried to find whether there's any correlation, they've continually found that there isn't. Again, Robey in his study, this was the study paid for, where they actually gave people marijuana and had them drive. They said one of the program's objectives was to determine whether it's possible to predict driving impairment by plasma concentrations of THC in a single sample. The answer is very clear. It is not. That has been the federal government's position for decades. And I keep hearing, we just need to study this more. Why? Ask and answer. Hartman and Eustis, Marilyn Eustis, who advocates for per se THC blood levels, admits in her own papers there's no direct correlation between driving impairment and THC concentration. Again, this is right from the NHTSA website. They have a fantastic fact sheet that says it is difficult to establish a relationship between a person's THC blood or plasma concentration and performance impairing effects. It is inadvisable to try and predict effects based on blood THC concentrations alone. NHTSA says this right in the DRE training manual. They say we cannot come up with a number that proves someone was impaired unless we're talking about alcohol. And in fact, NHTSA testified before Congress last year and told the House Oversight Committee just this when they were being grilled. I think lawmakers were stunned. They said, we've got numbers for alcohol. What are the numbers for marijuana? They said, we don't have numbers for marijuana. We probably never will have numbers for marijuana. And again, NHTSA says this over and over again. There's this wide variance between the way people are going to behave under the influence of THC, as I've talked about earlier. And again, I talked about tolerance earlier. I want to highlight this conclusion by Grotenherman and Mueller-Wahl. Franjo Grotenherman's paper on addiction in 2008, I believe it was, is where the 5 nanogram estimated per se threshold came from. And that was based on some limited data they did. Grotenherman has since said that you've got to take into account tolerance, because he says individuals that take a consistent dosage of cannabinoids, particularly patients, he says they become tolerant to the impairment of psychomotor performance so they can drive a vehicle safely. That's what the individual whose name is attached to 5 nanograms says about marijuana and driving today. You can drive safely. And the FDA essentially admits this with Marinol. Marinol is oral synthetic THC. And they don't say, if you are taking Marinol, do not drive. They say, do not drive until you are acclimated to the effects of Marinol, until it is established that you are able to tolerate the drug and can perform such tasks safely. There is no scientific theory as to why a person could operate a motor vehicle safely after becoming acclimated to oral synthetic THC, but never become so accordingly acclimated to marijuana itself. And here's an issue that's becoming more and more significant, this idea that you can have residual levels of THC that are identifiable in blood for periods of time that exceed well beyond any reasonable expectation of impairment. Erin Karchner and her crew in Baltimore published a paper several years ago where they found on day 7, 6 days after many of these subjects entered their lab, 6 out of 25 participants still had traceable levels of THC in their blood on day 7 of this study. And then this paper from Odell comes along from 2015 that blows Erin Karchner's numbers away. Because Erin Karchner found very low levels of THC in these individuals for extended periods of time. Odell and colleagues found much higher levels of THC in the blood of these habitual users. They had 21 subjects in the study. 9 of those subjects, so almost half, tested positive for THC at levels above the 5 nanogram standard some 24 hours after they last used cannabis. 1 subject tested positive above 5 nanograms 129 hours later. Of the 11 subjects who completed the study, because not everybody wanted to have a needle in their arm for 7 straight days, 7 of the 11 tested positive for THC at levels of 2 nanograms or higher. So these people tested positive for levels above 2 for a week after they stopped using cannabis. Several subjects' THC blood levels spiked during what they call the terminal elimination phase. During the period of time these people aren't using marijuana, their THC blood levels are going up. They're not going down. One particular individual between day 3 and day 4 went from 4 nanograms per milliliter on day 3 to 10 nanograms per milliliter of THC on day 4. And there's certain physiological reasons I could give you. I'd be happy to talk with you after the break about why we see these things happening. They said this makes interpretation of toxicological results much more difficult than it has been when it was assumed that THC followed a well-defined pattern of elimination. This is a really important paper. I think I put it in your materials, but if not, again, contact me and I can send it to you. You guys know this. Blood draws, clearly, there's usually there's a time lag that takes place between the blood draw and the focal event. We have no idea what the levels were at the focal event when the blood draw is taken 3 hours later. We can't back extrapolate. This isn't alcohol. About 5 minutes worth of material on field sobriety tests. Field sobriety tests were developed to determine people impaired by alcohol. As we've talked about, cannabis is not alcohol. Cannabis's effects don't manifest the same way that alcohol's effects manifest. They're different classes of drugs. Alcohol or ethanol is a CNS depressant. Cannabinoids are not CNS depressants. They act on different parts of the body and different parts of the brain. It is absurd to think that a test that was designed to determine whether people are influenced by one particular drug would be applicable to determine if people are influenced by an entirely different class of drugs that acts on an entirely different part of the body and manifests itself in entirely different ways. And so not surprisingly, when individuals try to take components or elements of the FSTs and apply them in a double-blind format to people under the influence of marijuana, they have very low success rates. And we see this again and again and again. This is the only study where, in fact, you find the clues, the 6 clues that individuals look for SFTs for alcohol. These individuals found those clues with individuals who have used marijuana, but it didn't help their specificity at all because they still falsely identified individuals in the study who were actually under the influence almost 60% of the time. So the clues didn't help them a whole lot. And this is the best study the federal government has on this. In a case I was just involved in, we lost a motion to get the FSTs thrown out, and we lost the motion because the judge said this study was so convincing. But we have newer studies that again show you don't even get the clues. This was a placebo-controlled study. They found that overall, subjects' performance on the field sobriety did not discriminate between THC and baseline. So in other words, the individuals performing the FSTs using the clues they were looking for, they couldn't get it right if we were dealing with a sober person or somebody who had used marijuana. Bosker and colleagues tried to recreate this model even in people using oral THC. In this case, they found no significant changes in performance post-dosing on the HGN, on the one-leg stand, on the walk and turn. They said this analysis of the field sobriety test does not reveal any significant effects of dronabinol or cannabis use history. I'll skip the DRE stuff so I can just finish with in conclusion. These are your take-home facts. This is what you need to know. Cannabis may influence psychomotor performance, but this influence is relatively small and short-lived. Cannabis's impact on psychomotor performance differs significantly than that of alcohol. Cannabis's estimated elevated risk is far less than the risk associated with other substances, both legal substances like medications or other illegal drugs. The unique pharmacokinetics of cannabinoids make it largely impossible to correlate impairment of performance with the presence of THC or its metabolites in a single blood or urine sample. Field sobriety tests and DRE evaluations are relatively poor predictors of cannabis-induced impairment. These tests have not been validated for cannabis, and that's in the literature. Every one of the studies I talked about that try to validate for cannabis begin by saying this has not yet been validated for cannabis. That's why they're trying to validate it. And they can't. And then finally, per se, and in particular, zero tolerance per se standards for cannabinoids may inadvertently criminalize behavior that poses little to no demonstrable threat to traffic safety, such as state-sanctioned private cannabis consumption by adults. Those are your take-home messages. These are places you can go to learn a whole lot more about this. And then these are just testimonials from people like you that I've worked with and assisted in these sort of cases. My personal favorite is this testimonial out of Vermont where this particular individual says that in my 24 years of practice, I have never had a state attorney fail to show up for a motion hearing. But in our case, the state never responded to my motion using your report, never identified an expert in response, or ever contacted me about a resolution. The judge dismissed the case for all the above reasons based on the merits of the motion. So those are the sort of ways I can help you. I wrap up with this. Carl Hart, whose work I cited, says this: once you know, you can no longer not know. Well, you folks, now you know. So go and do your due diligence, do your work, and educate those who don't, whether they're judges, whether they're prosecutors, whether they're elected officials. There's a lot of people out there that don't know, but now you do. Thank you. Paul.
That's just how white folks will do you.
Well, it's 4:20 here in the Pacific time zone. Got the dab rig ready to go, and our Electric Tuesday Daily Toker tune is on deck. We'll do some mellow phase when we come back. Big thanks to Paula Montano and Normal for allowing me to play that presentation. Chock full of facts. We're going to put those on an infographic one of these days. Happy 420, everyone. We're right back after these sponsor messages.
Well, every week we get to study a little bit of this cannabis science, and it's always fun to talk with Dr. Mitch Earlywine on this subject. This latest 420 Radio. Tune in, turn on, get highly educated. Oregon has joined Washington and Colorado in legalizing marijuana. We're Portland NORML, the national organization for the reform of marijuana laws chapter in Portland, Oregon. Join us as we celebrate the launch of an exciting new era in marijuana freedom in Oregon. Our job has just begun. Powerful interests want to white out the most important portions of Oregon's legalization law. By joining Portland NORML, you add your voice to the thousands who voted for Measure 91 and want it to be implemented as written. The people have spoken. Now it is time for the legislature to obey the will of the people. Find out more about Portland NORML at portlandnormal.org. Attend our monthly membership meetings on the fourth Saturday of the month. See our website for more details. Portland NORML, ensuring responsible adult marijuana consumers are afforded the same rights, privileges, and responsibilities as beer drinkers. The Fingerboard extension has fretted instruments to enhance your creativity. It has new and used guitars and banjos from beginning to high class. The Fingerboard extension has National Resophonic, Husson Dalton, Larrabee, Heritage and Recording King guitars, and Mike Ramsey, Wildwood, Gold Tone, and Recording King banjos. The Fingerboard extension also has drum stuff, used gear, and parts. Stop by the Fingerboard extension, downtown Corvallis, Oregon at 120 Northwest 2nd, or check out the inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com and reverb.com. Get.Buzz. .Buzz is the internet platform that fuels community interest, excitement, and new experiences. .Buzz is the premier online destination for internet users seeking the latest news on a variety of topics. .Buzz appeals to groups active in blogging, communications, journalism, advertising, and marketing. .Buzz offers registrants a stronger alternative to the shrinking namespace of existing top-level domain names, such as .com, .net, and .org. Get your name now at get.buzz.
Everyone knows music and marijuana go together, so let's wind up our 20 after break with the Russ Belville Show's Daily Toker Tunes, the best in pod-safe 420 music from around the web. Today is Electric Tuesday, featuring the latest in electronic dance music and other cutting-edge genres. Now, sit back and enjoy your Daily Toker Tune.
All right, everybody, we don't have Electric Bob on the line, so I don't know much about this tune. We might as well just get right into it. The artist is named Gareth Monks, and this tune is entitled Mellow Phase for Electric Tuesday's Daily Toker Tunes.
420 Radio, the world's voice of marijuana legalization.
Yeah, come to the weed shop, yeah, that's where we shop. Shop at weedshop.com. Come to the weed shop, yeah, that's where we shop. Shop at weedshop.com. Whether it's a vape pen, a pipe, or a bong, you can find it right now on weedshop.com. We got dab rings, nails, and ship it fast, whipping any of a competitor's glass. Come to the weed shop, yeah, that's where we shop. Shop at weedshop.com. Come to the weed shop, yeah, that's where we shop. Shop at weedshop.com.
Growing plants indoors can be a rewarding hobby, but electricity bills can go through the roof. Then you have to cool down all those big hot lights. It can drive a grower insane. With Lush LED lighting, you can solve many of these issues and double your rewards. Matt and his scientists have developed the perfect light for flowering plants with far less cost and heat. And the results? Very effective. Check out lushledlighting.com right now and tell them Radical Russ sent you.
I like funky music, baby. I like funky music, yeah.
Hey, this is Big Daddy, and I want you to check out my show, The Funky Roller Ring, right here on 420 Radio, because we love us some funky music.
I like it like that.
Funky music, yeah.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Welcome back, everyone. Just about half past. We're watching the news that's coming through the Twitter feeds of all of my drug policy advocates, colleagues, leaders, whoever you want to call them. But great stuff going on. We mentioned earlier in the news that there was kind of a congressional vote-o-rama that was happening because it's the appropriations bill that comes up, you know, funding the government. And last time this came up in 2014, this amendment broke through that banned the Department of Justice from using any money, any congressional, you know, any appropriated money, any federal funds, from interfering with the 23 states that have medical cannabis laws. Now, the DOJ's ignored that. They're still doing raids in California and Washington and Colorado and such. But, well, actually, mostly California. But at least it passed, right? At least it got through. We got the U.S. Congress, the federal government, to pass something that told the DOJ, told the federal government to keep its hands off the states. It's a significant blow. So this time around, the appropriations bill comes around. You still have to renew this amendment, right? The one to forbid the appropriations for any sort of interference with medical marijuana states. Another amendment was proposed today to forbid any appropriations from going against recreational marijuana states. And now, and I'm just picking this up from Twitter, and it's just happening. They just recently had a debate. Let me bring this up. Join the Majority tweeted at 4:22, so just about 9 minutes ago, that they were debating taking money from the DEA and putting it toward helping victims of child abuse. A little later on in my Twitter feed, also 422, Bill Piper from Drug Policy Alliance. It's called the Ted Lieu Amendment, and it would shift $9 million from the DEA's marijuana eradication budget to programs to reduce child abuse, and it was accepted today by a voice vote. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The Republican-controlled House of Representatives just passed an amendment to take $9 million away from the DEA's programs to eradicate marijuana, the helicopter flights, hi in Hawaii, I hope you're listening, to take $9 million from the DEA for eradicating marijuana and to help victims of child abuse. We don't want to go after pot anymore, says the federal government. We want to help victims of child abuse. Dan Reffel from Marijuana Policy Project also tweeted, a big amendment here would take money out of DEA's domestic marijuana eradication suppression program and put it toward treatment programs. Going further up in the feed, this was join the majority. This also passes on bipartisan voice vote. DEA just lost millions of dollars that will now be spent on much better things. So amazing things that are happening here in our U.S. Congress right now, today. And if you want to turn off the show and switch to C-SPAN and watch it, I wouldn't mind you doing that. Join the majority's latest tweet just came up. Now Congress is debating taking money from the DEA and putting it toward funding police body cameras. That was 425. And at 429, just 4 minutes ago, it passed. That's 3 amendments in a row, taking millions of dollars away from the DEA and putting it toward things that actually help people. SLC Colorado tweets that C-SPAN is off the chain right now. Y'all better tune in to defund the DEA amendments just passed on voice vote. More on the way. Let's see if we can get the C-SPAN feed going up here on our audio program here on 420 Radio. We'll just bring you this live. Why sit on the sidelines? Let's listen to what's going on in our U.S. House.
Mr. Speaker, that and I have seen as a legal aid volunteer in the courtrooms and then as a prosecutor, the impact of adequate legal representation. As I spent hours and hours along.
This is Representative Joe Kennedy of Massachusetts who's speaking, and sitting to his right is Representative Steve Cohen, who I just had the opportunity to meet last week, a couple weeks ago. I'm sure he's got an amendment coming up as well.
Adequate representation in the courts. We, Mr. Speaker, inside these halls debate with great vigor and great detail the nuances to every single piece of legislation, yet spend far too little time discussing about the impact of that or how that is going to be enforced after it becomes law. That is what the Legal Services Corporation does. The fact is that another source of funding for legal services is the interest on lawyers' trust accounts, IOLTA funding. With low interest rates over the course of the past several years, that funding has been devastated. In Massachusetts alone, that used to be about $34 million a year through a separate fund. That's been reduced to $4 million. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, that legal services have already been decimated at a time when more and more people need to understand that they have access to a fair and just legal system. That is what this amendment seeks to do. That is why I'm proud to support it, and I ask my colleagues to do the same. I yield my time back to Mr. Cohen.
Gentleman reserves for who seeks time in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, I claim the time in opposition.
Gentleman's recognized 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, the Drug Enforcement Agency does extraordinarily important work targeting high-level drug trafficking organizations, disrupting and dismantling them, attacking the economic basis of the drug trade, and contributing to counterterrorism activities that are tied to and financed by drugs. We've seen this
is Representative John Culberson from Texas, Republican.
Failed state. The northern part of the state is a complete disaster. We've got utter lawlessness along the Texas border, the southwest border, and it's so important that the DEA be given the resources that they need to do their job. And we have, I understand the concern about the Legal Services Corporation. I'll be filing legislation to give attorneys a dollar-for-dollar deduction in their taxes for services that they donate to the poor. So I think it's a far better way to get at the concern that we all have that legal services be provided to the poor by doing that through the tax code rather than by appropriating our constituents' hard-earned tax dollars. And the DEA has a very, very important job to do, and the concerns that the gentleman has raised, and I've heard other people raised about some of the activities of some senior-level folks at the DEA, we have withheld money from the Department of Justice in our bill specifically to encourage the new Attorney General to discipline those high-level DEA officials that were involved in that embarrassing and disgraceful episode that we saw take place in Columbia that the Inspector General uncovered. That kind of behavior is not acceptable, and they should all be fired. And we've encouraged the new Attorney General to do so immediately. And however, I think that taking additional money from the DEA is a bad idea, and I do encourage my colleagues to oppose the amendment. I want to make sure I've also point out that we've got an additional $43 million in this bill for violence against women programs.
What the representative is fighting against right here is an amendment from Representative Cohen and Representative Kennedy to take another $10 million from the DEA and give it to the Legal Services Corporation. That's the folks that provide the indigent with their public defense in federal court. John Walker's got that tweet out. Dan Riffle from Marijuana Policy Project as well. Go back to the C-SPAN audio to Representative Cohen.
Something like $40 million and a $2 billion budget. It would take $10 million, which would make a big difference to legal services. And once the Rohrabacher-Cohen-Farr Amendment passes, they won't be messing with states that have legalized medical marijuana, and it'll give DEA a lot more time to do the right things they need to do in northern Mexico and other failed states. And in the states that haven't failed, they'll stay out of them. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Gentleman, Texas.
Yes,
Have to yield my friend from Philadelphia if he's got comments and he needs time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want anyone to be confused here. The chairman has said in the subcommittee and full committee on the floor, and I've said it, that we realize that the Legal Services Corporation and the shortfall needs to be addressed. I believe before we pass a final bill, it will be addressed, right? There's no possibility that I'm going to support a bill that's got $300 million funded for Legal Services Corporation. So this notion of a $10 million increase on top of a $25 million cut, no matter, I don't want these votes to be viewed as some kind of ceiling for legal services. And I think we ought to be careful here to make sure that as the House is working through this, that we understand that the amount that the bill is at.
This is Representative Chaka Fattah from Pennsylvania, Democrat.
Taking that cut and, adding $10 million back to it is not a satisfactory response, notwithstanding the intentions of our colleagues here, right? So we want to address the bigger issue, which is full funding for legal services, right? And I just want, as we go forward in this effort, I want to make my intentions clear that I intend to fight to make sure that we live up to our commitment and our responsibilities in terms of fully funding legal services.
And I want to assure my friend from Philadelphia, as we get down further into conference, we've got priorities in the bill that we did not have enough money for, and we'll work hard with you to try to find resources, but let's not take it from the DEA, and I'd urge members to vote against this amendment.
Thank you, Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Tennessee. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not the gentleman from Tennessee.
I'd like to ask a roll call vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Tennessee will be postponed.
Representative.
For what purpose does the gentleman from there? Clerk will read.
Representative Cohen's amendment fails on voice vote. We'll get a roll call vote later. We've got another amendment coming up.
Salaries and expenses, $1,250 million.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment. Will the gentleman specify which amendment?
Yeah, 097.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Gosar of Arizona. Page 33, line 19, insert after the dollar amount, reduced by $5 million. Page 42, line 24, insert after the dollar amount, increased by $5 million. Page 46, line 7, insert after the dollar amount, increased by $5 million.
Pursuant to House Resolution 287, the gentleman from Arizona and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today to stand with the veterans throughout the country by offering a simple amendment to bolster the fund in this act for veterans treatment courts. Veterans courts promote sobriety and recovery through coordinated local partnerships among community correction agencies, drug treatment providers, the judiciary, and other important community support groups. Veteran courts have been extremely successful since they were first created in 2008 by a Buffalo judge to combat the growing number of veterans appearing before the court that were addicted to drugs and alcohol, as well as suffering from mental illness. Many of our nation heroes returning from combat are traumatized due to the associated violence and pressure of war, and often cope with such feelings with substance abuse. They need focused treatment and a helping hand, and these courts provide such an avenue. The alternative to veteran courts is often jail time. I think we could all agree that providing treatment for our veterans through community partnerships at the local level is a far better option than locking them up. My amendment pays for this modest increase for this critical initiative by reducing funds for the salaries and expenses for the overreaching Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives by $5 million. I offered a very similar amendment last year, which was adopted by voice vote. The ATF salaries and expenses are slated to receive an increase of $49 million from fiscal year 2015 enacted levels, which would bring the total appropriation level to $1.25 billion. My amendment redirects funds from bureaucrats in the mismanagement and overzealous ATF to a worthy treatment program for our nation's veterans. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to once again show their support for the worthwhile program by passing my common sense amendment. I thank the chair and ranking member for their leadership on this bill, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves.
Mr. Chairman.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
I'd seek unanimous consent to claim the time in opposition, but we are not opposed and would
without objection
agree to the amendment. The gentleman has a good amendment, and we encourage the House to support it.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Arizona.
I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Texas yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
84.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk, 084.
We'll report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Gosar of Arizona, page 33, line 19, after the dollar amount, insert decreased by $5 million. Page 42, line 24, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $5 million. Page 46, line 9, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $5 million.
Pursuant to House Resolution 287, the gentleman from Arizona and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today to offer another amendment with my colleague from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, to this bill that seeks to bolster another important program. First, I reiterate my thanks to the committee for the long hours they have dedicated to prioritizing limited resources in order to produce this bill. But I simply believe the House should not reward bad behavior for that type that the ATF has shown recently. My amendment is simple and is nearly identical to an amendment I offered last year, which was adopted by voice vote. The amendment shifts $5 million from the overreaching ATF bureaucrats to a worthy and effective program known as the Harold Rogers Prescription Drug Monitoring Program. You ask why $5 million? Because that amount would bring the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program appropriations back to the level originally approved by the House last year. The gentleman, Mr. Rogers of Kentucky, is the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, and he has been unrelenting on the issue of combating prescription drug abuse. This problem is truly plaguing our streets, our youth, and our communities. Prescription drug abuse is contributing to addiction, health deterioration, and even untimely death for too many across our country. Prescription drug abuse also fuels the demand for other illicit drugs such as cocaine, methamphetamine, ecstasy, and heroin, along with human trafficking, gun running, and murder. Much of this illicit activity flows over our southwestern border and into my home state of Arizona. The primary purpose of the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program is to enhance the capacity of regulatory and law enforcement agencies to collect and analyze controlled substance prescription data through a centralized database administered by an authorized state agency. States that have implemented the PDMP can collect and analyze this data much more effectively than states in which collection of this data requires manual review of pharmacy files. It is this body's duty through the annual appropriations process to evaluate which programs are worthwhile and which ones are not. The Prescription Drug Monitoring Program has shown promising results, but we must not give up. We must continue to think of our families, our friends, and our future generations. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this amendment. I thank the Chairman Culberson and Ranking Member Fattah. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Does anybody seek time in opposition?
I seek unanimous consent. to claim the time in opposition, but I'm not in opposition.
Without objection.
I support the effort here to increase funding for a very important program that is addressing a major problem in our country. I divorced myself from the offset, and not in terms of the actual offset, but in any criticism of the ATF. I think that there are some very brave, courageous Americans who are trying to make our country safer. But I think in lieu of the balancing act here, I support the amendment, and I agree with it, and I yield to the chairman.
And if I could also point out, actually, the ATF did the right thing here. I strenuously disagreed with the ammo ban and had a chance to meet with the head of the ATF as I was the new chairman of the CJS subcommittee and walked him through the problems he was going to face on this House floor with amendments and problems with their budget and their spending plan this year. And he's a patriot.
Well, sorry about that, folks. Got to turn off the speakers here in the studio. We're going to take a break from the congressional hearings that are going on these various amendments. But so far, 3 amendments passing by voice vote to take money from the Drug Enforcement Administration. One of the amendments specifically to take it from marijuana eradication. It's like one of our chatters said, man, the DEA is mortally wounded. And it's feeding frenzy time in the Congress. So we're going to get back. We'll take a break, and we'll tell you a little bit more about all of this. And as the votes go down, also we're going to be taking time to debunk some Project Sam op-ed in Louisiana. So stay tuned. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
Elitist. Just like any other dishwashing, burger-flipping, public school-educated, self-employed, bar band, musician, National Guardsman, he's Radical Russ.
We'll go late with the C-SPAN coverage as well if they continue debating some of these measures. We especially looking for the vote on Representative Cohen's bill. So we may just leave that feed open after the top of the hour so those of you listening to the C-SPAN coverage can continue to listen. It's 420radio.org. We'll be right back.
You can get 420 Radio on the go with our Shoutcast stream for all internet-enabled media players. Go to rad-r.us/420shout or just click the Shoutcast icon below the live radio feed at 420radio.org. Adam Hand of Handmade Apparel produces quality custom designs for t-shirts, hats, and other apparel. Handmade Apparel is the official design shop for 420 Radio among many clients who rely on Adam Hand for everything from short-run custom projects to full-run clothing lines. Visit handmadeapparel.biz to browse the selection of handmade gear or to get a personal quote for your own designs. Handmade Apparel, a proud supporter of 420radio.org. NORMAL stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks are far less than those posed by legal drugs. You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs. We've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs. We've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herb Age and Herb Thrasher on Twitter.
I'm not very good at singing songs, but here's a try.
If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. Space is filled with a network of wormholes. You might emerge somewhere else in space. Some win out in time. The sky calls to us. We do not destroy ourselves. We will one day venture to the stars.
That, of course, is Carl Sagan with A Glorious Dawn. That's the So Out There remix. You're listening to Toker Talk Radio. They're still going over there on C-SPAN with the hearings, the appropriations bill for the Department of Justice, and the DEA and ATF are being picked apart like a carcass, and a bunch of congressional vultures shifting their funding to other more reasonable sources, other more appropriate uses of our taxpayer money. And it's good to see. It's really a lot of fun to watch. But before we end the show today, I definitely wanted to get to this op-ed that I saw. This is in Louisiana. It was in the Times-Picayune in New Orleans. And the headline is, Marijuana as Medicine? Let's decide this by science, not emotion. And it was written by a woman named Stephanie Haynes. The bio on her says she's a specialist in drug prevention. Well, surprise. Really? Somebody from rehab who's against medical marijuana? That's weird. And drug policy. Having worked at the local, national, and international levels, she is chairwoman of the Greater New Orleans Drug Demand Reduction Coalition Steering Council. She has also chaired the Ethics and Good Government Committee of Citizens for Greater New Orleans. This opinion piece is supported by two groups, Smart Approaches to Marijuana Louisiana and Save Our Society from Drugs. Now, of course, we know Smart Approaches from marijuana. That's Kevin Sabet. This Save Our Society from Drugs, that's the Semblers. That's the Florida folks don't even have the time to go into the Semblers. But let me go into this op-ed, because this is their talking point that they like to use. And they can't use it so much in the West anymore, or the Northeast, but they still use this in the Midwest and the South. And it's this idea that we're just legalizing medical marijuana because we're all being emotional about it. Oh dear, we saw the cancer patient, we saw the kid with epilepsy, and they tugged on our heartstrings, and so we're making a big mistake. That we're not letting the science guide us. Forget for the moment that you just heard Paul Armentano dish out a shit ton of science on marijuana over the past couple of shows here. Never mind that there are more published studies on marijuana than any other drug out there. Forget that for the moment, that we have tons of science on this. Let's just get to the framing of this idea that we're being emotional and not scientific. She begins by talking about Senate Bill 143 in Louisiana, which would legalize medical marijuana. And she goes right to this. She says it would legalize cannabinoids as a medicine and take Louisiana back to 100 years ago, before there was any regulation of medicine by the Food and Drug Administration. That regulation has given us the best medicine approval process in the world. All medicines must be proven to be safe and effective by the FDA. Lady, you know how many medications that the FDA has proven to be safe and effective that I can rattle off the top of my head that have killed more people than cannabis? Vioxx, Fen-Phen, Ativan, whatever the latest, Yaz, the birth control pill, all sorts of these drugs that I see a commercial every other week, a new commercial from some law firm. Are you a victim of mesothelioma? Are you a victim of this? Are you a victim of that? Fucatol has been proved to kill people. You can sue, right? You see these ads all the time. So from the very beginning, the very first plank, your premise is flawed, lady. You're starting with the premise that the FDA is some gold standard shining beacon of purity and light. And without their blessing, we cannot determine that something is good for us. Oh my God, this is just... So she goes on, and it's basically the old argument. Many who support medical marijuana, and she uses the scare quotes, right? Medical marijuana, act out of compassion, but they need to take a second look at the issue. We share the same goal, but we cannot truly be compassionate until marijuana as medicine is proven to be safe and effective by the FDA. You know, this organization that we created 100 years ago, that's lasted for a century, we need to make sure that organization can prove that the cannabis we've been using for 7,000 years of recorded history is somehow safe and effective. Forget the 6,900 years leading up to the creation of the FDA, where nobody died from this thing. Forget that. Once the FDA existed, why nothing could be declared safe and effective. Well, guess what? There are drugs that we use today that have never been declared safe and effective by the FDA. And the number one that I can think of off the top of my head would be aspirin. Aspirin has never been approved by the FDA. Aspirin had just been used in common usage for so long that it was kind of grandfathered in. It was okay. And that wasn't that long that there'd been preparations of aspirin. So it's a bit of a disingenuous argument. And they continue on here saying, she continues on saying, before we developed modern pharmaceutical science, the field of medicine was fraught with potions and anecdotal stories. People convinced these potions helped, but they were absolutely useless or harmful to unsuspecting ill people. Yeah, well, we were talking about the late 1800s and people putting together all sorts of patent medications, some of which had harmful ingredients that hurt people, yeah. But at that same time period you're talking about, people were using cannabis as medicines, and nobody was being harmed by it. And it's just very frustrating to continue to see this type of argument, this continued reliance on the FDA. In fact, in this piece, FDA appears a whole bunch of times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. The entire op-ed is, well, the FDA didn't say it's medicine, so it must be dangerous. Must be terrible. Can't have anybody using it, even though 23 states have already let people use it. We just can't do it. Can't do it. All right, folks, that's all the time we got for today. Thanks for joining us. We'll have more for you tomorrow, including our look at Hemp History Week, because tomorrow is Hemp Day, Hump Day. Unfortunately, Doug Fine can't join us because it is Hemp History Week, so he's hella busy. Coming up next, the Activism Hour, and a little bit with DFW Normal, their interview with Alaska's Charlo Green. For everyone here at 420 Radio, I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down.